Another week, another overblown Donald Trump Russia scandal. This time, it is of course that Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner once met with some Russian lady who might have some loose connection to the Russian government under the pretext of having dirt on Hillary. Dirt that never materialized. And they met with her for about 20 minutes, more than a year ago. And exactly 0 votes changed as a result. Now, if there is scandal here, the president's opponents are doing exactly what they do habitually, drowning it out with overreaction that muddies the scandal instead of examining it honestly. Instead of taking the tempered, responsible, even potentially persuasive approach, raising questions about ethics and about transparency that can credibly be raised, they have to oversell it. They have to build a molehill into Mount Everest every single time. This one has to be the silver bullet that will finally end their ongoing nightmare. And so to them, it's not about issues like ethics or integrity. To them, it's about their end game. To them, it's about getting Donald Trump out of office. And the latest fashionable term they've chosen to try to do that is treason. We heard Hillary's running mate Tim Kaine say it.
We're now beyond obstruction of justice in terms of what's being investigated. This is moving into perjury, false statements, and even into potentially treason.
Talking heads on cable news said it.
Donald Trump Jr., what he did was a threat to our democracy and borderline treason.
This is unacceptable. This borders on treason. If it is not itself treason.
Even our friend Cenk Uygur implied it with this very clever graphic. Treasonable suspicion.
What is that I hear? Lock him up. Lock him up.
Very witty. And I do enjoy a good pun, but not as much as I enjoy the facts. So all of these claims had me thinking, what is treason exactly? And I know generally it's the betrayal of one's country, but I mean specifically and legally, what does it mean to be charged and convicted of treason? What's the actual law? These people are making legal claims and I want the legal answer. If we have to listen to this nonsense, we might as well know why it's nonsense. If only so we're prepared the next time the term treason is just thrown around casually. Let me stop you right there. No, that's the short answer for the rest of this video. There is no treason here. But if you'd like the long form answer why, let's get into it. Treason is an interesting crime, because it is the only crime specifically defined within the Constitution, and not just in terms of what treason actually is, but also procedural requirements to prove it. Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution reads, "Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act, or on confession in open court." The same section also gives Congress the power to determine the punishment, which it has done by statute, punishing treason with imprisonment, fines, or even death. And so what we have is a very narrowly defined crime. To commit treason, you either have to wage war against the United States, or you have to give aid and comfort to our enemies. And we also have very narrowly defined ways to prove it. You need either a confession or the testimony of 2 witnesses to an overt act. You need provable action, not just circumstantial suspicion. Why was this one crime, and this one crime alone, defined so specifically within the Constitution? Well, we need to consider the context of the time in which it was written. James Madison explains the thinking of the framers in the Federalist 43. As treason may be committed against the United States, the authority of the United States ought to be enabled to punish it. But as newfangled and artificial treasons have been the great engines by which violent factions, the natural offspring of free government, have usually wreaked their alternate malignity on each other, the convention have with great judgment opposed a barrier to this peculiar danger. By inserting a constitutional definition of the crime, fixing the proof necessary for conviction of it, and restraining the Congress, even in punishing it, from extending the consequences of guilt beyond the person of its author. That's a fancy, statesmanly way of explaining how the charge of treason can easily morph into a political tool. The framers wanted treason specifically and narrowly defined within the Constitution itself, such that genuine betrayal of the United States could be prosecuted and punished, but also such that the definition wouldn't loosen and be used to chill political dissidents, a core value on which this country and the Constitution itself were built. Because treason is so narrowly defined, there have only been about 30 cases ever prosecuted in the history of the United States, and none since the World War II era. But where it has been prosecuted, within this very narrow, constitutionally defined framework, how have the courts applied the law? The most instructional case for our purposes today is Kramer versus United States, decided in 1945. Anthony Kramer was a German-born naturalized U.S. citizen with expressed German sympathies during World War II. Previously, in the First World War, he'd even served in the German army against the United States. In 1942, Kramer met in New York with two Germans who were later discovered to be in the United States for the purpose of sabotage, for the purpose of disrupting American industry during the war. On the basis of his association, simply for meeting with these men, for drinking together, and for engaging in long and earnest conversation, Kramer was charged and convicted of treason in federal court. In considering the appeal of Kramer's conviction, the Supreme Court had to consider what it actually means to give aid and comfort to the enemy, as treason is constitutionally defined. Within that examination, the court noted the Constitution requires two things: adherence to the enemy, or loyalty to the enemy, as well as aid and comfort to that enemy through an overt act. Both intent and action are necessary. Neither is sufficient on its own. Justice Robert Jackson wrote for the majority. Thus, the crime of treason consists of two elements: adherence to the enemy and rendering him aid and comfort. A citizen intellectually or emotionally may favor the enemy and harbor sympathies or convictions disloyal to this country's policy or interest. But so long as he commits no act of aid and comfort to the enemy, there is no treason. On the other hand, a citizen may take actions which do aid and comfort the enemy, making a speech critical of the government or opposing its measures, profiteering, striking in defense plants or essential work, and the 100 other things which impair our cohesion and diminish our strength. But if there is no adherence to the enemy in this, if there is no intent to betray, there is no treason. And all of this must be provable by witnesses. We must know exactly what happened and exactly what was said. Mere association is insufficient. Regarding Kramer's meetings with the Germans, Justice Jackson wrote, "There is no two-witness proof of what they said, nor in what language they conversed. There is no showing that Kramer gave them any information, whatever of value to their mission, or indeed that he had any to give. No effort at secrecy is shown, for they met in public places. Kramer furnished them no shelter, nothing that can be called sustenance or supplies, and there is no evidence that he gave them encouragement or counsel, or even paid for their drinks. The whole purpose of the constitutional provision is to make sure that treason conviction shall rest on direct proof of two witnesses, and not even a little imagination." Thus, Kramer's conviction was overturned, and he was free to go. So how did the standards that the court established apply to this present-day story? The meeting of Donald Trump Jr. and campaign associates with this Russian lawyer. Well, based on the information presently available, we have a somewhat similar fact pattern to that in Kramer, though in many ways much weaker. We have an American citizen meeting with a foreign national for the purpose of a discussion. Based on their testimony and the testimony of other people present, we know it had something to do with dirt on Hillary, as well as Russian adoption, but we don't have any hard proof of what they actually discussed or what information may have been exchanged. Nor do we have clear intent to aid the enemy, nor do we even have a clear enemy present. Is Russia our ally? Is Russia our enemy? You can make a compelling case on either side, but Russia is certainly not our enemy in the same way Germany was in 1942, a time of congressionally declared war. If Kramer's meeting with actual German saboteurs during World War II isn't treasonous, it's hard to argue that Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with some Russian randos is. And while I appreciate the opportunity to learn about issues like this, I hope it's knowledge that's useful in the future, the lack of perspective and proportion on the part of the president's critics is offering no help in their effort to hold the president accountable, something we should all want to do. It's fine to have questions about what may be a questionable pattern of behavior within the president's inner circle. It's even fine to make bold claims when you have evidence to support them. But don't make bold claims that are obviously unsupported, bold claims that are at odds with the facts of the case, as well as the American value system that we've built to navigate these issues. I thought the whole basis of your stance against the president was it's not cool to mislead the American people, and it's not cool to undermine American values. If you call this case, as it presently exists, treason, you are doing both of those things. You are misleading people into believing there is a legal case where there is not, and you are demonstrating exactly why treason is a very limited legal concept under the American Constitution in the first place. It's so reactionary opportunists like you can't use the charge for political posturing or as a political weapon to punish your opponents. If you really hate Trump, think about why you hate Trump, and then do not do those things. It is at that point that your credibility and your respectability might actually start to return. But you better get to it. Your ability to beat him next time depends upon it. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Okay, bye.